Welcome to Pandemic Pages, a literature and culture podcast from the University of Hull. I'm Lucyl Harrison, and joining me today is Rhiannon Lucy Coslett, a Guardian columnist, the author of 2 novels, a memoir, and a collection of writing on motherhood. Her latest book, Female Nude, is a novel of the female body set in Greece, which explores art, motherhood, desire, female friendship, and class struggle. It was published in hardback in February 2026, and the paperback came out in July 2026. Rhiannon's memoir, The Year of the Cat, was published in 2023. Her memoir explores issues around motherhood, women, and recounts her experience during the COVID-19 lockdowns. In it, Rhiannon explores her feelings around the possibility of becoming a mother after caregiving for her autistic brother. And a new kitten named Mackerel helps her as difficult memories resurface during the pandemic lockdown. The Year of the Cat was reviewed in The Observer as admirable and affecting. It was written about as not so much as an ode to cats or cat ladies, but as an honest examination of Coslett's traumatised yet resilient self. Also a BBC Radio 4 series, The Year of the Cat was hailed as a moving and compassionate memoir about surviving trauma and finding new ways to live and to love. Today we talk to Rhiannon Lucy Coslett about The Year of the Cat and the fabulous ekphrastic encounters in her new novel, Female Nude. Let's welcome Rhiannon. Thank you for meeting me. I have been doing this thing where at the start I ask a question, but I won't ask you to answer it until the end. So I'll let you know the question and then we'll come back to it and it'll like bookend it, if you like.
Sure.
So today's question would be, if you could own any piece of art, what would it be? Okay, so I'll ask you at the end, which I think is a good theme for today. We're talking about The Year of the Cat, which I have the book, get the book, and I read it. But I also listened to your audiobook again this weekend, which is you. It's you narrating it.
I've never listened to it, but
have you not?
I really enjoyed the process of recording it. It was good. So
how long after did you record that for your audiobook? Was that in a...
I'd had my son and he was still a young baby at the time, so it would have been 2022. I seem to remember it was the spring of that year. I was still pumping. I had to go into the room and pump milk.
1 second.
It took a whole day.
When I first asked you to come on to Pandemic Pages to talk to me, you said you felt really strongly about pandemic literature, which is great, and it really annoyed you when people didn't want to encounter any art about it. So did writing about the pandemic feel intuitive to you from the start?
Yeah, and I think it has to a lot of different writers. I mean, there was always a kind of cohort who said, you know, people don't want to read about that, but I think it's dependent on where your viewpoint is, really. I mean, you know, I sort of view writing from a more artistic point of view than from a kind of purely consumerist point of view. So although the reader is important, what a reader does or does not want to read isn't really a part of my thinking when it comes to being creative and what you feel kind of compelled to create. And I think living through the pandemic was such a kind of intense emotional experience for so many of us that we couldn't help but want to translate that into fiction or memoir, you know. I did both. I'd say like my novel's less of a pandemic book than my memoir, but it still kind of is suffused with it in some ways. And I think that's something we're seeing more and more with novels now. They might not necessarily be entirely of the pandemic, but you can trace the pandemic through them and its after effects, you know? So I think it's that. I mean, I think it's almost bizarre for a writer to kind of try and dodge it, really, or to try and dodge it entirely, because, you know, it's fine if you're writing kind of speculative fiction or something, but if you're writing realist fiction or you're writing memoir, you can't pretend that it hasn't happened.
When I have spoken to a few authors, they've mentioned authors that where their publisher has said, you know, don't write about the pandemic, and so they didn't. And I was like, oh, that's such a sellout. Like, why have you done that? And it's just because sales, isn't it, and marketing and publishing. It really annoys me when that happens. And the whole thing with the pandemic pages now as well is this is how we live now, and it's massively impacted literature, culture, history, anything that we do, education. Even at the moment, I'm a tutor privately, and so many people come to me and they're like, my GCSE student's struggling, and it's the pandemic. There's been a loss of learning, and everything, like you said, could be traced to the pandemic, which is why people need to recognise that a bit more. And for me, I don't think it's like being like, oh, pandemic, pandemic, pandemic in capitals. It's sort of like knowing, like you said, that it's infused. Let's move on to the experience of actually writing and publishing the memoir. And I just said about those publishing attitudes. Did you encounter any of that?
No, I think I was really lucky. I kind of approached the memoir as I would have approached a novel.
Yeah.
So there was a huge kind of creative element to it. And I think my editor is quite similar in how she views. She doesn't actually publish much memoir. She's much more of a fiction author. And I think, but she did publish I Am, which is a really brilliant memoir by Maggie O'Farrell about her various kind of near encounters with death. I mean, it's not a pandemic book, but it's a brilliant, example of creative nonfiction, I suppose. So I think she recognized, my editor, the importance of, making art about that time and place. And of course, sales are of concern to every publisher. But I think, there are different editors who are kind of, more on the literary side of things, I suppose. She's more on the literary side of things. So she's less concerned with kind of mass market than perhaps a more purely commercial editor might have been. For her, it's all about the quality of the work and, the message that it's trying to send. So I felt quite supported in that. But also it was quite early on in the kind of both the pandemic and in the kind of aftermath. It's not as though it had been tried and tested. It's not like a bunch of pandemic books had been published and then failed, which I think would have made it much more difficult to kind of sell the book than it was at the beginning, where we didn't quite know the extent to which people would want to read about it. And I think the other important thing is that it's not just a book about the pandemic. Although it's set in the year of the pandemic, it's got some perennial themes that I think women will be interested in for generations to come, which is, how do you make the decision whether or not to become a mother when it feels like the world is on fire? And that might be because of a pandemic, or it might be because of climate change. It might be because of war. It might just be because of I say just, but, the economic crises that everybody's facing. So, that's not a question that's going away.
No, and
it's the art historical thread too, which is looking back. So, there's a lot going on. It's not just about lockdown, I suppose.
Yeah, two things I want to pick up there is the first thing that you said about this, that you're having perennial themes, but the other thing to say is there is this dialogue about the pandemic where we keep talking about books set during the pandemic, but actually your book is set during lockdown, like explicitly. And it really reminded me, and I was looking at it, the chapters, the way that it moves through the seasons, narratively, chronologically. And that reminded me a little bit of how Ali Smith structured the quartet, the summer. And so, I found that again. That seemed to be probably just like the most natural way to narrativize the lockdown, is just go through it, just like month by month. There was no other way but just to write, I suppose. And diaries do that. The medical memoirs that I've studied in my thesis, they might take like 40 days of the pandemic. And then other people have like taken the waves, if you like, that we got of the various lockdown restrictions.
Yeah, I mean, I think like one of the things that I really wanted to capture about that time, and it felt very artistically important for me to do that, even if nobody read it, I was kind of like, well, the people who were children during this will one day want to know. They may well come to have a fascination with that time. And if nobody's written it, there's going to be an absence of information there. And I think one of the things that I really wanted to capture about that feeling of being in lockdown was also kind of, the sharpening of our awareness to do with the passing of the seasons. You know, there were things like sitting in the garden in spring and hearing this absolute wall of birdsong that I'd never really heard before, and wanting to remember that because of the lack of traffic and the lack of aeroplanes in the sky. You were suddenly much more confronted with the kind of purity and beauty of nature in the city than you would have ordinarily been. So, and there were kind of the practical things, like, you know, when it got to autumn and winter, having to entertain outside in the garden with a fire pit because you couldn't legally bring people inside, and how that affected your social interactions and your environment. These are all things that I think could so easily be forgotten as people just kind of move headlong into the new era of not thinking about it anymore. And it was really important for me to kind of pay tribute to that.
Yeah, I really like the structure of the book. And I love, obviously, mackerel. I love the lore of cats that you were just talking about, both the writerly, historical, cultural, but the mythical as well. Everything's folded in. The writers who have cats, I just love it. This is the perfect book for me, to be honest. Like pandemic and cats. When I first spoke to you about this, you said that, just a heads up, you were like, this is a Trojan cat, which I really like the idea of that, like, you know, Greek. We've got two things going on here today. The Trojan cat. So shall we elaborate on that?
I think the cat, you know, is kind of, as you say, as I said, apparently a Trojan cat, which is,
I love that phrase.
I use the cat as a way of exploring femininity, because it has long been a symbol of femininity, going all the way back to mythology.
Familiar.
And its kind of association with fertility goddesses. And, you know, because I was at the time going through this, I suppose, agonizing process of trying to decide if I wanted to have a baby or not, and yet was feeling these kind of feelings of longing about a baby very strongly, I think the cat was a very convenient way for me to explore a lot of those ideas. And also on a very simple level, just I felt a powerful need to look after something. And the cat kind of allowed me, adopting mackerel kind of allowed me to work through some of those feelings that I had about whether or not I could be a mother. You know, I kind of started off very anxious about her, not helped by the fact that she had an accident quite early on in her life. And, you know, there was a trip to the vet where they couldn't find her womb. And you know, I think the background of the pandemic kind of exacerbated all that feeling of kind of, so it kind of helped, she kind of helped me work through a lot of my feelings about whether or not I would be a good mother, or whether or not it'd just be, you know, completely anxiety provoking all the time. You know, my mum always jokes that mackerel was her first grandchild, but like,
I'm like, these are the only grandchildren you're getting, so everybody else.
I do think they become part of your family, animals, you know, and the way that we live with animals, and particularly the way that women live with animals. That was something that was really important to me, for me to explore. And there's been like a whole bunch of other books now exploring that, like one about a hare, one about a horse.
Raising Hell, Chloe Dalton, so beautiful, pandemic themed again. So
is it? I haven't read it, but
stunning. You know, baby hare, leveret, and I just
in a way, I think maybe it kicked off a little trend for like motherhood animal books.
No, I love it. Listen, I'm 32 and I don't have children, so like both of these books that I'm talking about today, they're about childlessness as well, is really where I'm at. And it's been such a serendipitous encounter to read Female Nude just in the week just gone, and reread this again and be like, this is actually really where I'm at, because there's all those conversations around you, and it's the same in this book, The Year of the Cat. People are, you know, people are falling pregnant because you're at that age, they're becoming, and everything's really shifting.
Well, in a way, I think they're kind of part of the same project. I mean, you know, I think there are a lot of writers whose kind of body of work, when you take it in its entirety, you know, they're all essentially exploring some kind of fundamental question.
Yes,
exactly. And what happened with these is that, you know, I was halfway through Female Nude, and there's a point in that book where a cat walks into the book.
I remember picking up in the audiobook and being like, she had to have a cat, didn't she? A Greek cat.
What actually happened was the cat walked into the book, and I then put the novel down and wrote The Year of the Cat. So I'd already written half of Female Nude when the cat, I didn't have any control over the cat.
You do say that in here, actually, don't you? You say, I've already got a book, but I put that down because of the pandemic.
Yeah. So I started writing it, and then it was the cat that made me realise that I wasn't ready to write Female Nude, because I didn't feel like I could write Female Nude until I'd resolved this other question of motherhood and cats. So the two books are kind of, although they're very different, they're very kind of closely enmeshed.
I felt when I put them together, I thought one of the quotes was, "Sad that life isn't set up where women can have children and a career." One of these core questions that, again, I probably am feeling personally attuned to more than anything, having just finished my PhD. But there's this question that I saw Zadie Smith, there's an article many years ago, who hit back at the suggestion that women should sort of restrict the size of their family if they want to avoid limiting their careers. And it is one of these things, like, can we get to the bottom of that in a way? Like, if I was to have a baby now, like, that would impact my career. And that's the whole thing you've got floating around. So reading those two books together explores that across such a spectrum that I've really enjoyed. They do feel symbiotic.
Thank you.
At the time you were doing Guardian interviews with carers and NHS workers, weren't you?
Yeah, I was writing a big piece for the then Weekend magazine about post-traumatic stress disorder among medical staff.
Yeah.
So I was like one of the first people to kind of cover that in the paper in great detail. So I was doing a lot of interviews with people who were kind of coming off shift in intensive care and still hearing the beeping of the machines kind of following them home and all those other horrible symptoms that you get with PTSD. So yeah, It's
interesting you say that, because in my in the research in my thesis, something that I looked at was the way that people couldn't stop hearing the beeps and how that comes into specifically medical memoir. The beeps. And actually, interestingly, the zip of a body bag, that's another thing. Roddy Doyle wrote about that because he had said that nurses couldn't stop hearing that. And the sirens is something that comes up for you here as well, because you covering childhood and adulthood trauma a bit here as well, aren't you? So you're saying that the sirens again was a symptom of PTSD for you. So hearing those,
yeah, it's interesting how these sounds kind of echo through everyone's experiences in a very similar way.
Yeah.
Okay. In the weeks leading up to the start of the pandemic, I'd been worrying about contracting a virus, not COVID, but Zika, which was being widely reported at the time and which could have a profoundly disabling impact on an unborn fetus. We had planned to go to Thailand, but to do so would mean delaying trying for the baby by several months due to the prevalence of the disease there. I was not fully resigned to this delay, nor had my husband and I really discussed it. The desire I felt to become a mother was urgent, but most of the time it fermented within me as a churning grief that I was unsure how to express in any way except anger. And so in the months leading up to the trip, I'd become wordless and distant. By late January, the novel coronavirus was tearing through Southeast Asia. We cancelled the trip, but the knot of emotions that it had raised were difficult to untangle. We needed to get away, and so, in the middle of a storm, we took the train to Cornwall. And on the way, I listened to Blue, because I was. It's hard to choose a favourite song on Joni Mitchell's Blue, an album I discovered when I was a teenager, and which has come to mean more to me than almost any other. The first song from it I heard was The Last Time I Saw Richard, which I downloaded illegally using Napster for the pure and simple reason that it had the name Richard in the title, and I had just been dumped by a boy of the same name. I knew Joni was for sad girls and I was a sad girl, but instead of the simple breakup song that I was looking for, I was confronted with this intense adult work of great emotional complexity. As with all of Joni Mitchell's music, the older I get, the more I discover within it echoes of feelings that I've experienced but been unable to pinpoint. It was Little Green that I listened to on the train to Cornwall that February. Joni's song about the daughter she gave up for adoption in 1965, though this was not made explicit until more than 20 years after Blue's 1971 release. It's all there in the words, though, if you listen. Little Green is a ballad to a child who is being let go by her mother, who tells her to be a gypsy dancer and to have a happy ending. But the line that breaks my heart is this: there'll be icicles and birthday clothes, and sometimes there'll be sorrow. I suppose because it speaks so perfectly of childhood And sometimes it feels as though all I've wanted for years now, is to give someone a childhood, icicles and birthday clothes.
You get a real mix, don't you? You've got this sort of like sadness, but also this loveliness, which I think always comes out. I don't think all pandemic stories are dreary, which is like the general cultural thought around that, but they're not. I always like to say they're not all doom and gloom.
No, and human beings are complicated beings, and we have feelings, and
Light
I'm
and dark, and
interested in other people's psychologies and what they were experiencing at that time. It was a time of high emotional stress, and it impacted lots of people very differently.
yeah, well, you can try to encourage people to think of like positive things that happened to them in that time. I mean, people just had huge life reshifted completely, definitely. And maybe, like you said, they had this new appreciation of nature or the time at home with children, perhaps, which was probably very stressful, actually.
Mhm.
Having read other books that are like just trying to keep children entertained with about 10 million arms.
But there are children who, obviously children are all different too, but there are children who remember the pandemic very fondly because of the kind of opportunity they had to spend time with their parents in kind of a domestic context. So,
Yeah,
I'm sort of interested in what those memories are going to look like as they're shared more with us in the future as well. I think it's a lack of curiosity in a
completely.
person to kind of just write off the pandemic as not interesting.
Yeah, and the intriguing thing to me is that if I mention that I'm looking at the pandemic in literature, or, I have a podcast that gets people to try and share their lived experience. The first thing people do is tell me about their pandemic,
Yeah.
and I'm like, I just want to kind of like just say, can you hold on a minute and just hold like a microphone out so I can go around recording oral histories and ferreting them away in an archive somewhere, because they're just lost, aren't they? They'll be the scripts that we inherit, but not, you know,
And
never
people
recorded.
forget.
Yeah,
People
and we do.
memories
So
are so
you
important.
completely. We forget so quickly, don't we? And that's the thing with oral scripts as well. We start to add things to it, or you might have heard someone else said something else, so then the story becomes a different story, which is great for creative writing, actually.
Mhm.
Yeah, let's talk about the next book, which you've already mentioned. Has references to the pandemic, which I was obviously thrilled to. They're not huge, but they're just tiny little things that are threaded in, aren't they?
Mm.
Especially the ending. But I won't talk about the ending. But
No.
so let me ask you about Female Nude first of all. Can you just tell us briefly the premise of Female Nude and what it is that you paid attention to in life that brought you to that concept?
Well, it's about a Greek holiday, and more specifically, it's about a woman in her early 30s who's on a Greek holiday with three much more privileged friends from university. The villa belongs to the father of one of them.
Mm.
And she's at a point in her life where she hasn't had the success that I think she wanted to have as an artist. She works in a shop in an art gallery and is still kind of trying to work out what kind of painter she is. Her partner is a curator and is much more successful in his field and is kind of at the stage where he'd quite like to have a baby, and he's putting pressure on her to do so. So this is the kind of background to it. I guess she's like the other side of the coin to what the Year of the Cat is about, because the Year of the Cat is about me, who is somebody who very much wanted to have a baby, but had all of these kind of concerns that I think was stopping me from kind of jumping off the cliff, as it were. My character, Sophie, is somebody who really doesn't want to have a baby. She's the opposite. She is terrified of the implications of what that will.
Sophie is me. I'm reading this going, oh my God, this is me the whole way through. I honestly was hoovering and started to cry. And I don't think that's normal. I think nobody else will probably cry in this book. I'm not sure, but I did.
I don't know. A few people have said it made them cry. I think,
It's so real. It's so real. It might be fiction, but it felt, wow. Yeah.
Thank you. That's what I was trying to capture. So she's kind of, I suppose, simmering with all this tension that comes from this pressure that she's under, but also the very kind of real class differences between her and her friends. and how it feels like at that age everybody's kind of going off in different directions. Some people will have been given money by their parents to buy property and will be
By their house. Yeah.
and other people are kind of still struggling with precarity. So it's about those kind of, I guess, fault lines that can open up in female friendships. And it's about female desire, because without wanting to give too much away, she kind of embarks upon an experience with another man that I think clarifies things for her in a way that she had not expected. So
Yeah.
there's a lot going on. And she's painting
Completely.
a nude portrait of her friend at the time.
Rhiannon Lee, she said that her tutor had said that you have to write the non-fiction for you to be able to get to the fiction. And I feel like that's what's happened here.
Yeah, I think part of why I put it down was that I knew that, as I said, that question of motherhood needed to be resolved for me, whatever decision I kind of took. I'm trying to not give too much away here, but I felt like I had to resolve the question in my own mind before I could give Sophie an ending.
Yes. Funny, isn't it? Because that's taken years, really, if you think about it as well. These things take, you have to, it's nice to know that you have to put books down. Some books take 40 years, don't they? People write them for a lifetime and they just happen.
I've got friends who write a novel every 2 years, but I'm slow. I do a lot of thinking time. I do a lot of research. But I think the book benefited from that. But I don't think it would be as good if I had kind of pushed myself to kind of churn it out, I suppose.
Yeah. And the book to read as well. There's so many words on the front that are like smouldering and propulsive, but all of these things it does, I feel like it was like ambling along, but it was a bit spicy, and it was also love and regrets and just everything folded in. And I just thought, this is just delicious, actually, to total holiday read, but also life read. The structure of the books, and this was like, had this cat conceit here, didn't we? Had this like cat trope device, if you like. Now I'm absolutely in. This is probably why I really love it as well, because at the beginning of the chapters you have the art. You describe the art. Now the reason I love this is because I absolutely love ekphrasis, and I did it in my master's dissertation. There's a poem which Shakespeare purportedly written during the closure of the theatres in the bubonic plague, The Rape of Lucrece, long narrative poems. And that had ekphrasis in, The Rape of Lucrece. And I love the device so much. And basically what it is where the writer creates like a vivid verbal description of a piece of art. So it could be like behind them, but like the start is the photo postcard, isn't it?
The Paula Modersohn Becker.
That's it, yeah, Paula Modersohn. And
so
yes,
it's female nude self-portraits. So there's been no history written of female nude self-portraiture that I could find. You've got books about female self-portraits, you've got books about the female nude, but specifically female nude self-portraits, that was something that I kind of went off and researched myself. So each section is a conversation that Sophie is having, an imagined conversation that she's having with a woman artist who created a female nude self-portrait, usually while she's standing in front of it in a gallery.
Yes.
And so, there's a lot of ekphrasis in this
book. Oh, it's brilliant. I love it so much.
I love too. I mean, I was talking to someone who wrote their thesis on fictional artworks.
I need to read that thesis.
Yeah. So it's something that obviously I do a bit of it in Year of the Cat as well. I think it's quite obvious that visual art is something that's very, very important to me. And so the way that Sophie relates to paintings is quite similar to how I relate to paintings, which is on a very intimate, kind of profound level. So there's, I think, 19 different works of art in the book. Yeah,
it's so full of it, and it's beautiful as well, because it's like art history, isn't it? It's like an art history fiction, but at the same time we've got this modern contemporary narrative exploring all friendship, female desire, but also like feminine sympathy a little bit as well, which I thought was really interesting, how sympathetic we are to others. So that was just love it, and completely another reason why I kept reading, because it was learning as well. What's the next what's the next or portrait on Sophie's mind, and what will it be, and what will I learn? So yeah,
It's
beautiful.
just come out in Germany, and a few of the German readers have been saying, like, we want this published as an edition with all the paintings in it, you know, which I
The
think,
UK needs that as well. Get on that, please, Rhiannon.
I think it'll probably be very expensive and cumbersome to produce, but
Yeah,
wouldn't
but
it?
special editions, everybody loves a special edition these days. I'd definitely
That's
buy that
true.
book.
That's
Stunning.
true.
Yeah, you're talking about the women, so the cast of characters. Like I said, I found this a really weirdly timed read and was crying whilst hoovering. The ekphrastic encounters, but also this serendipitous encounter in the timing of my life. And again, another Yi and Lee thing that I remember her saying is that when you're writing, when you're reading, you really want to eavesdrop on a character's heart. And this is it. This is totally eavesdropping on Sophie's heart. This is how you do it. This is how you completely, everything is there. Everything Sophie says. She's not shying away from.
She said some very difficult things, you know. I mean, you know, particularly at the beginning, she's quite kind of misogynistic about other mothers, really, about mothers.
Yeah,
You know, that she says some kind of quite, I suppose, dark thoughts that many of us have thought, but which we rarely speak out loud,
true.
you know, about the work of mothering and about the kind of demotion that it involves in the eyes of others, you know. She says some very uncomfortable things about body image and about how women compare their bodies to other women's bodies, and this
Yeah.
kind of feeling of competitiveness between women.
She also speaks out loud about, like, well, not speaking out loud, but when you, she's actually saying, like, I'm trying to angle my body so that I look nice to, like, the other boys there. And I think that energy is so true. And but saying it out loud, nobody wants to say that out loud. But the whole point is the male gaze. That is like
Yeah,
even like Instagram, like male gaze. And obviously this is the topic of.
the book.
Yes, so phenomenal. Yeah,
Mm.
just completely love it. Just love the way that Sophie's heart is on the page completely.
Oh,
So what kind of character traits were you drawn to for your female characters then? Like you were just talking about class.
I think I was interested in nepotism and how it can create a sort of air of defensive. Well, you know, one of the characters, Iris, is kind of a pure nepotist, and that she wouldn't have the job that she has if it weren't for family connections. And as a result, she's kind of quite brittle and unpleasant. And it comes from a place of defensiveness. It comes from a place of kind of knowing on some level that you've got where you are, not because of talent. And kind of externalizing that as, you know, judgmental, kind of unkind, not very nice behavior. And that's something that I've encountered when I've met nepotists, you know, in my own industry. And it was something I was always quite interested by, that kind of lack of humility, I suppose. Because of course you can meet some absolutely lovely nepotists who are very open and kind of, you know, they've kind of, you feel like they've done the work and they recognize their privilege and they're kind of self-effacing about it. And then you
But
have
ultimately the mask sort of slips a little bit, doesn't it, as well?
yeah, but then you've got the other kind who are just kind of can be quite nasty as a way of kind of hiding their own insecurities and their own kind of lack of talent without wanting to sound too harsh. So I think that is Iris, and I think the extent to whether or not you believe Iris depends on the extent to which you've encountered nepotists. You know, she is to me a very real character, sadly.
Nepotism is such a I don't like the word topical, but it's in our news cycle at the moment, obviously, isn't it? Truly, because the people that we've grown up with, you know, the Spice Girls, the Beckhams, the Gallaghers, you know, and they've had children. Now they're adults or young adults, or seeing them defend or just make their own way in the world, which is also really nuanced because they didn't ask for this level of fame at the same time. And then, so yeah, and I think privilege is at the core of this and runs through the other girls. The ending is turbulent in terms of, I'm not going to say any more, but it's turbulent. And the thing at the end, something that happens at the end is like Sophie is, there's a real horrible comment about class, which I thought was at the end of the day, something that, like you said, they threw at her. And the other thing was the other female character marrying Harry is Helena.
Yeah.
That is another character where I was like, we've all got a friend where we think, don't marry that man.
Yeah.
Just don't marry
Yeah.
that man. But what Sophie says is like, you cannot say that to them. You have to be there and ride it out with them. My two friends were talking about this the other day, and we were like, would you actually say this to your friend? You were like, no, you can't say these things.
Yeah, and I think of the female, of the women on the holiday, Helena is the one who she actually has a true close friendship with.
Yeah.
Although I think Alessia also has her very,
That's strange though.
They're all quite complicated women, I think. Even Iris has her moments of being sympathetic.
Yeah.
And you do kind of get a bit of family context about not seeing much of her parents and feeling kind of abandoned as a child and all this stuff. But, Helena's the one, I suppose, who comes from a more normal background. But she's about to marry someone who's very successful and probably, like, as they used to say, marrying above her.
Okay, yeah.
And she's also become just completely obsessed with her wedding. And I think that's something that we can all identify with as well, is that you might have this woman in your life that you absolutely love, who's, an interesting, educated, intelligent woman. But the way the wedding kind of industrial complex can kind of swallow women's souls. And it's like there's this kind of recognition there that Helena has become obsessed with her wedding and that she will eventually emerge from it. The others are all completely bored with talking about her wedding.
Yeah, or not being able to wear white and because it's her.
Yeah, exactly. But there is a kind of, it's like Sophie and Helena's friendship has kind of lost its way. And you're sort of hoping that they'll come back to each other. But she's going to marry this awful man, and I think that's something that...
And Harry is awful. If you've written a really unlikable character, it is Harry.
Yeah.
Oh my god, Harry is just... I couldn't stand him. I was listening to it in the audio and I was thinking, I can't wait for him to stop talking.
I think it's so interesting because, like, in my first novel, I approach privilege as well. And I can remember one reviewer saying that, my posh character hadn't really been fleshed out that much. But then somebody else said she's like every single posh London girl I've ever met. So I think people bring their own class baggage to the book. Whether or not they like these characters, whether or not they find them convincing, whether or not they think they're two-dimensional or they think they're really real.
Yeah, he's archetypal.
Everybody projects their own experience onto it, which I really enjoy. I always really enjoy that. Like, some people absolutely hate Sophie.
Really?
They really hate her. They think
but she's mixed, isn't she? She is like but that's the whole beauty of her character now.
Yeah.
But Harry's unbearability, I just... but yes. I can see why people would be irked by Sophie.
Some readers just hate infidelity. They just find it so morally repugnant.
Well, probably because, again, infidelity baggage. Yeah, they might be feeling...
Yeah, people bring their own shit to books. They really do.
It's great. That's what you want people to do, though, isn't it? Because it gets them really going on it. But
absolutely. I always really enjoy it.
The comments on social class, for me, it's being said that there's like a class ceiling more than ever right now, particularly in creative careers. I just want to ask your opinion on how important are working class voices in literature as characters, but also, in life, in creative industries.
Oh my God, so important. It's so boring if you've got people all coming from the same kind of
middle top
social background. I really worry about this. This kind of keeps me up at night because I do think that the state of literary fiction at the moment is, unfortunately, that a lot of people aren't reading to the same level or extent that they used to. And as a result, sales aren't what they used to be in terms of literary fiction. I mean, that's been the case increasingly for a long time now. When you compare to, say, kind of like the 90s, what people were reading. And that means that publishing has less money to invest in working class voices. It means that the only people who can afford to kind of have the luxury hobby of writing literary fiction are those who have like independent means of financial support. Totally. So you end up with kind of similar stories from similar people, and it's really dull. And I
Really
really,
bland. Yeah, it is really worrying. And I am working class, and so a lot of the single parent background again, which has been mentioned in your pandemic memoir. But yeah, I just think you don't get that, and generally in the books it's all very middling, and it's such a
yeah,
shame, because even with Shakespeare, I remember studying him and thinking, when people that aren't in the middling sort arrive in these, they're the most profound characters in the plays as well, and they have the most empathy
yeah,
actually as well,
yeah.
and so I find that.
I wouldn't call myself working class. I'm middle class, but my
Mm.
family was impoverished through divorce
Mm.
and through single parenthood, through disability as well, through my
Yeah,
brother's
caregiving.
disability and my mum being a carer. So I had I had that experience of financial poverty in my teens, and growing up in a working class community is obviously something that all of my friends were experiencing as well. Most of my friends had single mums too. It wasn't really till I got to uni that I realized the extent of privilege in the UK,
Yeah.
because it was like we were all sort of in the same boat growing up. Okay, like my parents have been to university, so I identified as coming from a more middle class background. But like everyone was skint, everyone was on free school meals, everybody pretty much had a single mum, and financial struggle was just like part and parcel of everyday life for a
Yeah.
lot of us, particularly my closest childhood female friends.
Yeah.
And suddenly entering into this world of privilege, I found it really confronting. I found it really difficult. And that's what I wanted to explore in the novel. I mean, Sophie is from a more working class background because I think that was important for her story as an artist. The challenges of making it in the art world, where you haven't grown up in a house where people have art books on the shelves, you haven't been taken to galleries, you haven't got like that base layer of knowledge of like Greek mythology or whatever. It just means that everything is like an extra struggle for her to try and make it in that world. But I was really interested in how like basically class anger, class envy, class tension can kind of exist in the body and then explode. And it's also anger about being a carer, anger about how carers are treated, anger about how women's opportunities are limited because of the care work that they undertake. She's got all of this stuff inside her that kind of does end up exploding without one.
Bubbling. Yeah, it does really. I had said explosive ending, but I tried not to. I thought, was that going to spoil it? But yeah, it's really super turbulent. I think again, I just self-identify with Sophie on that level, because I had to care for my granddad at the end of his life when he had dementia, and this was like one of the people that raised me in my life as well, helped raise, in the absence of a dad. So like, just that realizing that caregiving narrative strand and how much that can delay and impact you, that really doesn't surface till it's that childhood trauma thing, isn't it? It's like things don't surface until maybe you're just really exploding at a point that it's not the time that it should come out.
What you say about having an awareness of what I think it's knowing what it is to look after someone
Yeah.
makes the prospect of having a baby to look after feel so much more loaded
Yeah,
than if
because you've
you've
already
never
done
had
this.
any experience of having to completely sublimate your own needs for somebody else
Yeah.
because they need you.
Yeah.
You
You're a
know,
parent as well, aren't you? You've already been a parent, like, even though you haven't, and it's very strange. It's
yeah,
in loco parentis, isn't it? It's like you are
yeah,
a parent at such a young age.
yeah.
What has been your favourite review of, could be The Year of the Cat or the Female Nude? Because I was looking at your stories, and they was, they'd said that this is basically masturbation material, but the story was good if that's what you like, basically.
I mean, I did really enjoy that one.
I thought that was brilliant.
It was from a German reader basically saying that like it's pornography, it's masturbation material. The character is completely like devoid of any morals, but still 4 stars.
Yeah, I
I
know,
mean, that was
great.
kind of like ideal for me. I was like, great, that's fantastic. That's fantastic.
Dropped a star for the masturbation material.
Yeah, I mean, The Year of the Cat got really beautiful reviews in The Guardian and the TLS, and There was a particularly thoughtful New Statesman review of it. Female Nude was really nicely reviewed in The Guardian. I'm sort of seeing what readers have to say about it. I'm quite interested in seeing what readers have to say about it, but I'm kind of protecting myself from the critics a bit until I feel like emotionally ready. There's not very much review space. There's even less review space now than there was, around the time of the pandemic. And of course, the difference between memoir and fiction. I mean, literary fiction doesn't really get much review space now. So I felt really lucky to have that beautiful Guardian review. And I think the Irish Times reviewed it as well. I'm not sure. Yeah, but definitely the one calling it pornography has been my favourite so far.
I think that readers or listeners who are listening to this will now read that for that phrase alone. I would anyway. I'd be like, I'm straight to it.
I was like, I didn't think the sex was that graphic. I don't even use the word penis or anything.
No.
Compared to like Sally Rooney or someone like that, I felt like I was being quite timid, really. But I guess it depends where your level is.
Yeah, I think they just have such a gorgeous physical attraction. I loved it. I had everything. I was just enjoying my life, hoovering, crying, obviously. Yeah. so I'm just, yeah. You were just talking about the lit fic, because you're a journalist for The Guardian too, aren't you? So what's the most useful career advice or career experience you've had?
In terms of writing fiction?
Just anything, fiction, memoir, or just generally, like, because I know Sophie's like, she's a creative artist.
I think you have to read. And you have to look. I'm as prone to anyone to watching reels on Instagram. They're very addictive. I noticed that when I was doing that, my reading basically cut in half. So I had to stop because I was like, I'm not reading anymore. I'm just watching these videos that are ultimately meaningless, even if they're quite funny at the time.
And they crap
or have like really good gardening tips, whatever, ultimately, like it's not the same immersive experience as sitting down and reading a book. And I think it's really important, particularly at this juncture in history, for you to preserve your attention span and to read deeply and widely, and also to not wear headphones in public, listen to what people are saying, listen to dialogue, eavesdrop, observe, be in the world, engage in the world, go to art exhibitions, look at art, eat beautiful meals, swim in beautiful seas, just all of it, like live in the real world. I mean, it sounds kind of ridiculous to say it out loud.
It's stunning advice.
More urgent than ever. If you want to be a writer, you have to live in the world and you have to immerse yourself in books.
You have to observe completely. Yeah, that's stellar advice. Thank you so much. Okay, the last question now. Thank you so much. If you could own any piece of art, what would it be?
Oh, it's really difficult for me.
Have you been asked this question before?
Well, it's hard because I kind of feel as though I should pick a woman, because I do love so many women artists, and also the work of women artists has kind of shaped and defined my own work and my own life experience. Saying that, the thing that always comes to mind is a Rothko.
Okay.
So it's very difficult for me because I love Rothko. I've always loved Rothko since I was a teenager. Since I saw the Rothko room at Tate, it just has a very profound emotional effect on me, which again, people might sneer at, but it's not the same if you look at a photo on a screen as it is if you're standing in front of a Rothko, and the experience that you might have in the room with a Rothko. So to anyone who kind of turns their nose up at Rothko, I say, well, have you seen it in real life? I think the thing is, I'm renting at the moment and I don't have a house big enough for a Rothko. So, in that case, I think I'd probably have a Tracy Emin drawing.
Yes.
I love her. I loved her show at the Tate Modern recently. I've loved her for so long. So, or do you know what? Maybe a Suzanne Valadon.
We just got a list now.
Yeah. No, I've got a lovely print of a Suzanne Valadon. She did such brilliant female nudes. They're nudes that are kind of real women. They feel so fundamentally like real women. She just understood that. And I've got a really gorgeous nude by Suzanne Valadon in my bathroom. I'd like to replace that with the real thing, as opposed to a reproduction, maybe.
Okay, there you go then.
There you go. I've got there eventually.
Judith and Holofernes, I always thought that was like, but that's extreme. But
Quite hard to eat your cereal while looking at that, though.
yeah, I know. And I thought
particularly hard for your husband to eat his cereal while looking at that. Yeah. Did you want me to read from this?
Yes, I would love to.
Read.
Please, make me read from Female Nude.
So this is about Susanna and the Elders, which is a painting by Artemisia Gentileschi that was painted in 1610. Sophie is encountering it. For a long time, no one cared about your work. Most was attributed to your father, Orazio, who taught you to paint. Your training probably started not long after your mother died in childbirth in 1605, leaving you, from the age of 12, a mother to 5 younger siblings. Academics even claimed that your Susanna and the Elders, painted when you were 17, was done by him. This despite the fact that it bears your signature. This old tale of sexual harassment and blackmail was an interesting choice of subject for a young woman who would be brutally raped a year later, and whose reputed beauty was already making you the subject of rabid male curiosity and innuendo. When I saw it on loan to the National Gallery, I thought that what makes it so obviously a work by your hand is your intimate understanding of the female form, as well as the psychology of how it feels to be a young woman under siege. Your nude Susanna looks so alive that she could stand up from where she cowers and wander from the canvas. For how long did you study your own figure reflected to be able to paint a nude like that? This is not a painting that exists for male titillation, but one that tells the story of life in a woman's body. It was the year of the pandemic. Desperate for culture after weeks of confinement, I bought a ticket for your first major retrospective in this country. I walked around masked in that hallucinatory haze that comes from weeks of sleep deprivation. I had a feeling at that time of almost splitting open. The strain of keeping us both alive with so little contact with others was getting to me. I was not used to being around people, and my new status and the paraphernalia that came with it made me a source of annoyance to them. Even though the baby slept throughout, her breaths a constant reassuring snuffle against the warmth of my chest. I was still negotiating this new tender self when I read that most of your children died in infancy, and how, after you lost your four-year-old, Cristofano, only a daughter survived. I felt a visceral nausea. I hadn't expected to laugh in the gallery either, but the realization was so delightful that I couldn't help it. There you were, unmissable, in almost every painting of a woman. Seeing these works side by side in full size made it unmistakable. You'd put yourself everywhere. There you were as Cleopatra and Mary Magdalene and St. Catherine of Alexandria, and of course Judith. Judith brutally beheading Holofernes as your maidservant holds him down. A painting full of blood and rage, a revenge fantasy in which you hold the sword, your brow knitted in calm concentration. When I was taught about you, my tutors were still very much of the mindset that our appraisal of art should be separate from the artist's biography. Funny how that school of thought came in just as feminists were bringing stories like yours out into the light. They said your rape was irrelevant, but you only have to look at that painting to feel your fury with men. But it was in front of your Susanna that I stood the longest. Here I am, you're saying, let me show you what a woman can do, because only a woman could have made this.
It's so good. I've just round of applause from the audience.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much for your time, Rhiannon. I have absolutely loved it. I think both the books, again, I know the timing is just perfect for me, but both of the books are incredible. And so thank you for that.
Thank you. It's been a lovely conversation. Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.